There we go. Okay. So thanks everyone for joining. In case you don't know me, I'm Kate. I think I know most of the folks on the call, which is awesome. I'm Kate. I'm an executive coach. I work with senior leaders and leadership teams on the interpersonal side of leadership. So, like building strategic relationships and communication and dealing with tension and having difficult conversations and making big decisions, building influence, like all that stuff that shapes everything that we do, all those intangibles. So this webinar is part of kind of a free series that I'm offering focused on interpersonal dynamics at work. So in December, some of you may have been there with me in December as well, I think. Our focus was on difficult conversations. And I shared some tools and techniques to help us have those conversations where we name the behavior, talk about the impact, the opportunities for change, and try to put together something a bit more digestible for us to have those kind of awkward conversations. And while the difficult conversation often helps us feel like we've cleared the air, we find that a few weeks later, the same patterns, the same challenges often return to their default. So today, what I'm going to talk about is what's fueling those patterns that might be holding us back, that are making us feel like we're really stuck in relationships. And I'm going to share with you a few patterns and then patterns underneath the patterns, some techniques that I use with my coaching clients to help them start to create some more lasting change in these difficult relationships and challenging relationships at work. So that's what we're doing today. And just a heads up, see if I can get my Zoom to work. Just a heads up on what's coming next month. I mentioned this was a series of webinars that I'm offering. Next month, I'm doing something a little bit different. It's a working session. It's a small kind of invite-only working session that's focused on AI's impact on leadership teams and how they're working together. So their interpersonal dynamics, how it's impacting their roles, the decisions that they're making, their identity, their accountability, the communication, the ways of working, all of that fun stuff. I do a lot of work with leadership teams, and I've been fascinated at the way that some seemingly basic AI tools are having a massive impact on how these teams work together and how they show up. So I've just started to talk about this event a little bit, and I have I have a leadership team in the US and one in the UK that are going to be joining the conversation, and also interest from somebody in Australia as well, which is awesome. We'll see if we can get the times to work. If you're interested in joining, please send me a note. While I say it's invite only, that pretty much means it's just that I'm not making it hugely public. I'm not going to be going on LinkedIn and putting it out there. This is meant to be a small group of people where we'll share best practices and learnings, and I'll share back with you after the event some of the top line findings and how they might be able to work with you, or how they might be able to help you out in your leadership team over the coming months. So that's what's happening next time. Today, as I mentioned, 60 minutes. Well, we probably have a bit less of that now. Presentation is up front. It'll be probably about 20, 25 minutes. Then we're going to move into a Q&A. The slides will be shared. Within the next 48 hours, I'll send out an email with the slides, the recording as well, and some additional information in case you'd like to read more about the concepts that I'm talking about today. But with that, oh, Faye, I haven't introduced Faye and talked about the Q&A.
Hello.
So my friend and colleague Faye is helping me out behind the scenes with the Q&A. So how we're going to work the Q&A. Faye, do you want to talk about it? Do you want to introduce yourself and talk
Sure.
about the Q&A?
Yeah. So I'll do the housekeeping bit first. So I've just popped it in the chat. So if you think of any questions that you'd like to ask, put them in the chat as we go. I'll manage the Q&A when we get there after Kate's finished speaking. Just make sure you send your chat message to everyone. It's set to that by default, so it should be fine. If you see a question that you particularly like the sound of and would like to discuss, give it a thumb up so I can prioritize it. And I'll be trying to prioritize questions that look kind of beneficial to most people, rather than kind of deep dives into niche scenarios that maybe aren't kind of as beneficial to all. Um, as Kate said, we'll record the talk, but not the Q&A, and that's very intentional to encourage people to be open and honest. And that also means that we'll follow Chatham House rules, which is you can talk about what you hear in the Q&A, but don't attribute anything said to the individual that said it. So, quoting people publicly is not okay because then, that kind of goes against the whole speaking openly and freely, etc. Hopefully, most people are probably familiar with that anyway. It's pretty standard stuff. Um, and yeah, for myself, so Kate and I, we've been working together for about 10 years. I was fortunate enough to have Kate as my mentor and coach when I first became a product leader. And I think part of the reason that we've stayed connected all these years is because I'm also very interested in the human side of things. And we kind of have a shared passion in that space. And yeah, I really am interested in how we interact, how we are intentional about our interactions, and how our human skills, how we hone our human skills that then enable us to be better leaders and product people. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here today and looking forward to getting into the nitty-gritty of this topic.
Thank you very much, Faye. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to start out today by doing a quick poll that I'm going to launch to just give me an idea of what's brought you here today. So, of course, the topic is same people, same patterns, and relationships at work that we feel are stuck. Could be at work, could be beyond. But my question is, when you think about that other person in the relationship, what statement comes to mind? That they're the problem, whatever the dynamic is, it's not working, it's their fault. That you're just kind of stuck. You have no options in this situation. You have no power, no resources to make any change, or that if anything's going to change in the relationship, you're going to be the one to do it. You're going to be the one to fix the problem. So I'm just curious, which one are you leaning towards? Looks like we have 15 of 21 people sharing. I'll give it another couple of seconds to see if anybody else wants to join in. Okay. Oh, one more? Anyone? Okay, we're going to end the poll there. Oh, so, wow, it's a close one. Sharing results. Can everyone see that? See the results that have come up? Great. So, the slight winner is feeling like that if there's going to be any change in this relationship, that you need to fix the problem or nothing will get better. You need to be the one to solve it and save the day. A close second is that you just feel stuck and there's really can't really see a way to shift this relationship to make any changes. You have no power in that. There's no options. And interestingly, coming in third is pointing the finger at somebody else, saying they're the problem. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Let's see. I'm going to go close that. So you may not have realized that those responses map directly to this tool called the Cartman Drama Triangle. It was created by Dr. Stephen Cartman, who's a psychologist, and he developed it to help his clients better identify the stories that they were telling themselves about their relationships, be it relationships at work or beyond. Sorry, something keeps popping up in my view. So how these stories were impacting them, and their relationships. And I use it pretty much the same way with my clients. So as you'll notice, the triangle is made up of three roles, or what I often refer to as storylines. There's the hero, victim, and villain. The hero is that storyline or that mode that we step into when we say like, if you could go ahead and make sure that you're muted. Okay. Are we good? Okay. Thanks, everyone. So it's made up of three storylines, the hero, victim, and villain. So the hero, as I was saying, is that storyline that we tell when we feel like we need, if there's going to be any change in the situation, it needs to come from you, right? I need to be the hero. I need to save the day. I need to fix whatever's gone wrong. It's up to me to do it. Then there's the victim, which is the role that we all hold. And obviously, a few of you in the group are in this place today, where we feel like it's out of our control completely. We have no power. We have no options, just feeling very stuck in whatever's happening with this relationship. And then we have the villain, which is, I often call the chief finger pointer because they're the one that blames the other person. It's always the other person's fault. And Cartman Cartman basically said that he called this the drama triangle or pinpointed it as drama because we can shift and change our roles so quickly that it feels like it creates an extra level of intensity and drama in the relationships. So you could at one moment feel like you're being the hero in the relationship and then quickly shift to feeling like you're a victim or a villain. That's quite normal. That's quite expected. He also said that the reason that we do this, the reason that we step into these roles is because there's some kind of perceived threat. We feel that we're in danger. It's kind of our evolved manner of survival and our evolved response to fight and flight. So instead of picking up and running out of the room, we don't do that quite as often anymore to help create kind of a sense of safety. We're going to create a storyline that helps us feel like we're more protected. Because without that storyline, we feel like we're just kind of we're living in a lot of ambiguity. There's a lack of clarity. With the storyline, we have a sense of direction, even no matter which role it might be, the hero, victim, or villain. So in coaching conversations, this comes up all the time. It's really interesting. Once you see the pattern, it's hard to unsee it. So I spend a lot of time with clients being able to understand the roles a bit better and also to be able to identify themselves in the roles in real time. But we spend more time trying to understand what's fueling the response. What is it, the pattern under the pattern that's making them feel at risk, that's making them feel like they're in danger and that they need to create a storyline to create some kind of safety for them. And what we discover is that it's something seemingly simple, something that's kind of hidden in plain sight. And that's that they have expectations of themselves or another person that are not being met. So I'm going to talk a lot about a concept called expectations today. And expectations, for the purposes of our conversation, I want to put a definition around them. That's that there are internal standards about how things should work, internal assumptions that we have in our minds, needs that we feel need to be met, hopes that we might have. But the trick is that they're often kind of in our magic minds. They're in our subconscious in many ways. We don't realize we have them until something happens and we're triggered to respond in a way that in like the drama triangle way, because they're just lacking. They haven't been sufficiently met. So for example, expectations at work could be how decisions are made, right? You have a certain expectation for how a decision is made, how feedback should be given and received, how someone should behave in a meeting, what good leadership looks like, what respect looks like, how quickly something should happen. These are all expectations that are often unspoken, right? They're also often unacknowledged. So, and again, when we don't have the time or space to actually kind of understand them, to grasp, to understand them and really own them, then it triggers behaviors like we see, like that that we see in the drama triangle. So let me just give you a few more examples. So these are a couple of examples from coaching clients that, of course, have been anonymized, and I'm sharing with you with their permission. But the first one is called The Promotion That Wasn't. A client of mine came to a session recently, very disgruntled, very frustrated, because he was expecting to get a promotion that he didn't get. And he was very much kind of in that victim mentality. It's the poor me. Everybody's out to get me. I don't know why I didn't get this. Everybody else got them. It's just me. I'm just stuck in this situation. He was also a bit of a villain because he was pointing fingers at his boss and saying, basically, it's the boss's fault that I didn't get it. She didn't stand up for me when it came to having conversations around moving up to the next level. So I asked him a little bit about the conversations he had with his boss in anticipation of the promotion. When did they start talking about it? What was the conversation like? And he said, oh, they hadn't had a conversation about it. He just expected, given the amount of time he'd been with the organization, the quality of his work compared to those around him, that it was his turn to get a promotion. And so we talked through that a little bit, and he actually went and had a conversation with his boss about this expectation for a promotion to find out more why it didn't happen. And his boss's response was very much, well, I had an expectation that you're an adult and you manage your career, and if that's something that you were wanting to grow in this organization, you would tell me about it, and we could take things from there. So complete just mismatch of expectations between my client and his boss. Nothing evil. No, like in reality, there really was no victim. There really was no villain. It was just complete lack or complete mix match in what they were expecting from each other. So that's one example. A second one that I'll share is what I call the indecisive CPO. So a client of mine who's a senior VP at a larger organization had a new boss, a new CPO, chief product officer, had stepped in. And that person had been with the organization for many years, but had not been in a senior level product role. So my client came to our session one day very frustrated because she felt that her boss was not making decisions in a timely manner, wasn't communicating those decisions well, and as a result was blocking the team. The team was feeling demotivated, and she was feeling demotivated. So I again asked her about the kind of conversations she's had and what her expectations might be around decision making and communication. And she was very clear. She's like, I would expect a decision in 48 hours. I would expect it to be communicated to my team in this manner. And I would expect a certain type of stakeholder alignment to be kind of to be brought into the conversation as well. So I asked, of course, if she had shared that with the CPO, and the answer was no. That she said, she hadn't even realized she had these expectations in her mind until we started talking about it, and was unsure about how the CPO might react. So she went and had the conversation, and the thing that she did differently in the next conversation is she started with, I realize that I'm assuming I have an expectation of you to make a decision on this matter within a certain amount of time, within 48 hours. What's feasible for you? And with that one phrase, she was starting to shift from having an expectation to making an agreement with the CPO, with her new boss. And that's where we can start to really reset these patterns and understand how we can move from being in a place of ambiguity to a place of clarity. So expectations, I mentioned, are internal standards about how things should work. Agreements then are shared clarity about how things will work. So we're moving from a should to a will, right? Moving from having unexplored or unconscious expectations through having conscious expectations, negotiating around those expectations, and aligning expectations. It's a big piece of work, right? This does not happen overnight. But by doing it, by moving through these stages from unconscious to conscious, um, we are moving away from that need to have a sudden reaction, from being suddenly feeling like we're living in ambiguity and needing to respond as victim, villain, or hero. We can move to a place that's more safe, that's more stable, and more clear. So how do we do this? I mean, it's nice to have kind of a spectrum and different phases that we know we need to move through. There's a few things to obviously start out with, and that's acknowledging that it's got to start with you, that you need to take the time to either work independently on yourself with journal, or with a colleague, with a friend, with a coach, to start to understand what your expectations are, right? Because all of this, it's not going to change unless it does start with you. You need to do the work. Understanding what feels obvious to you, what haven't you said, what might be holding you back, what you might not even realize is there until you start to talk about it. Kind of like my client and her decisions, her feelings about her expectations about decisions with her boss. She very clearly stated expectations that she could share with me, but she didn't even realize they were kind of swimming around in her mind. So when we do then, have a chance to collect the expectations and then get ready to have this conversation, we need to have that conversation with a lot of curiosity, because something is misaligned, right? Your expectation, which you're now aware of, might come as a complete shock to the other person and their expectation. So it's opening it up with questions like, I realize I've been assuming this. I realize I have an expectation around X and we've not talked about it. How feasible is that for you? How are you thinking about Y? Starting with some curiosity, starting with some open-ended questions to help you understand where their expectations might lie, because there's a fair chance that they haven't taken the time to do the work that you just did. And then we move towards building an agreement. I'm going to get into agreement building blocks more on the next slide. So what makes a good agreement? It's kind of hard to turn this into a formula, but there are a couple of building blocks to keep in mind. That there needs to be a clearly stated need, right? It's not a complaint. It's not a judgment. It's just, this is the need. I need to have more clarity around decisions. I need to have a better understanding of when I ask for a decision, when I'll hear back from you. We need to focus more on the fact that it's a mutual benefit. So it's going to be really hard to get somebody to sign up to an agreement unless there's something in it for them as well, right? So what is it that sharing a decision within 48 hours is going to give to the boss? That's something to talk through. That's something to negotiate. Then the specific action needs to be called out. What are the next steps that are actionable and measurable? And respect for boundaries, because realizing that both parties are going to have limitations, right? What works for you may not work for them. And you've got to acknowledge that, because there is no agreement unless it works for both of you. And as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, that building these agreements is meant to stabilize the relationship, right? We move from expectation, where we're living in a lot of ambiguity, unknowns, and that triggers responses like those that we see in the drama triangle, to clarity with agreements, where we know where we're going. We know what we can rely on in a much clearer way. So an example of what the expectation or what the agreements look like with my client who's a CPO, or my client who was reporting into the CPO and having that conversation. So they co-created agreements around decisions, and they started to talk about them at different levels, because no one decision is really the same as the other. There's a lot of different levels of decisions. So they created some different kind of a hierarchy. If it's urgent, then they need to come up with the time frame that is immediate and what that looks like. They need to talk about that together. If it's a decision that can wait, then they can also put a time frame around that. But also they put things around, if the decision is is delayed, if she doesn't get the decision that she's expecting in 48 hours, what can they do? We need to put in some different kind of stop gaps in some ways to help us check in again when we slip from the agreement, because agreements are not going to 100% work all the time. We will have default behaviors because a lot of times this is massive behavior change. So we need to, I thought, did a great job of putting in some kind of backstops of if the decision doesn't show up, what can we do? Couple more building blocks to share around expectations and agreements. So I'm often asked, when's a good time to go through this process? And really, it's any time. But some things that kind of stick out when you're starting a new role, when you're starting a new project, when you have a new boss or a manager, when you're joining a new team, when you're building a new team, when you have a new client. I have my very first coaching session with any new client is building expectations or looking at our expectations and building agreements together. So it becomes part of our vocabulary and part of our way of working from a coaching perspective from the very beginning. It's also, of course, something to focus on when there's been repeated deadlines that are missed, when boundaries are getting kind of broken and misaligned. So it's something that we need to check in on regularly. And it's something that, of course, when I say check in on regularly, some of my clients actually they have a document with the other person, be it their boss, a stakeholder, a team member, whoever it might be, that is a shared document that they can go in and take a look at. They can treat as kind of like in product the way we talk about roadmaps, that it's a living, breathing document. Our expectations and our agreements are going to change all the time. So we need to be committed and dedicated enough to go and look at them, see how they're feeling to us, see where there might be room to move, and engage in that conversation with the other party to see how things are working with them. A few gotchas and things to watch out for. We need to make sure that after we do have a tough conversation, that sorry, my screen has just gone blank. So I'm going to look.
Use immediately stop.
Okay, yeah. So when we do have a difficult conversation, we fall into our same old patterns. We need to kind of be aware that that is something that happens. That's something that we're going to need to respond to, and that's something we need to watch out for, because things are not just going to fall into place. And the same the same thing comes with expectations and agreements. We need to be aware of and watch out for how we're shifting between victim, villain, and hero. We need to be aware of our stories and our expectations, especially that word should. You know, everyone else should be doing this way. Leaders should behave this way. I should be compensated this way. That's like a key word that can pull our attention to the fact that this is most likely an expectation that we're dealing with. We need to avoid this. Sorry, I'm kind of reading from it because my screen's gone a little bit blank. We need to avoid the slower work of making things explicit. So that means when we do actually feel like expectations are all around us and we're kind of losing track of them, we need to get really comfortable with the fact that we do need to step back. We do need to spend some time, be it with ourselves or a coach or whoever it might be, to think through what might be holding us back, what these expectations might be, these shoulds might be. And most of all, we need to remember that while we feel like this is something that everyone should be doing, we can't make that happen, right? The patterns don't really change until you do the work. So while we're talking about same people, same patterns, a lot of the emphasis on that same people includes you, right? So nothing is going to change unless you do some of the work. When you take the time out to take a look at those expectations, you have the conversation around what an agreement might look like, and make it part of your relationship check-in. Make it part of building towards a more healthier interaction. And that's all I've got for expectations and agreements in terms of slides. I am, as always, offering a 45-minute kind of relationship reset session. So if you'd like to talk about this in more detail, craft some, take a look at what your expectations might be, craft some agreements and sample agreements that you can start to work through with somebody else, please get in touch. Faye, I think, is going to be putting into the chat a link to my Calendly where you can do that. And